Alex Rock stared at his computer screen, the quarterly reports blurring before his eyes. After 30 years of building rock construction from the ground up, he should have been celebrating another successful year. Instead, an unsettling feeling had taken root in his gut, growing stronger with each passing day. The office door opened, and Sarah, his assistant of 15 years, entered with her usual quiet efficiency. "The board meeting is in 10 minutes, Alex." And James called again. He said it's urgent. James. His son and CFO. The pride of the company, according to the business magazines. Alex's jaw tightened as he remembered their last conversation, filled with passionate arguments about the company's direction. "Tell him I'll call back after the meeting." Sarah hesitated, something unusual for her. "There's something else. Angela wanted me to remind you about dinner tonight. She said it's important." His wife of 32 years. Another conversation he'd been avoiding. Angela had been different lately, distracted, defensive, constantly checking her phone. The changes were subtle, but after 3 decades together, he noticed everything. Rising from his desk, Alex straightened his tie, a habit from younger days when he needed to prove himself to skeptical investors. Now, at 62, he was the one others needed to impress. The company employed over 500 people, with projects spanning 3 states. It was his legacy, meant to be passed down to James, just as his father's small construction business had been passed to him. The boardroom was already full when he arrived. Thomas Chen, his oldest friend and head of legal, gave him a concerned look. They'd started together, sharing cheap apartments and cheaper dreams. Now Thomas lived in the same exclusive neighborhood as Alex, their families intertwined through decades of birthdays, graduations, and holiday celebrations. James sat at the far end of the table, immaculate in his tailored suit. At 35, he was everything Alex had hoped for in a successor: brilliant, ambitious, charismatic. Yet lately, there was something in his son's eyes that reminded Alex of circling predators. "Let's begin," Alex announced, taking his seat. "First quarter projections." James launched into his presentation, his confidence evident in every gesture. The numbers were impressive, too impressive. Alex had spent enough years in construction to know that 20% growth in a declining market wasn't just unlikely, it was impossible. "These contracts with Summit Development," Alex interrupted, "they're offering us rates 30% above market value. They're prioritizing quality over cost," James explained smoothly. "Our reputation commands a premium." Thomas shifted in his seat, a tell Alex recognized from their poker nights. Something was wrong. The meeting continued, but Alex's attention kept drifting to the subtle undercurrents in the room. The way certain board members avoided his gaze. The quick glances between James and Robert Miller, their new head of operations. The way Thomas kept touching his collar, a nervous habit from law school. After the meeting, Alex returned to his office, his unease growing. He opened his private browser and typed "Summit Development" into the search bar. The company had appeared suddenly 6 months ago, winning major contracts across the state. Their CEO was listed as William Harrison, but the photograph showed a young man who looked barely out of college. A knock at his door interrupted his research. It was Thomas, his usual confident demeanor replaced by obvious distress. "We need to talk," Thomas said, closing the door. "Not here. Meet me at Charlie's." The usual time. Charlie's was their old haunt, a dive bar where they'd celebrated their first contract 30 years ago. They only met there now when something was seriously wrong. "What's going on, Thomas?" "Not here," Thomas repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "And Alex, don't tell anyone about this. Not even Angela." After Thomas left, Alex sat in silence, his world shifting beneath his feet. He pulled out his phone to call Angela, then stopped. Her recent behavior, the late-night yoga classes, the new clothes, the password on her phone, took on a darker significance. Opening his desk drawer, he removed an old photograph. It showed himself, Angela, and James at the company's 20th anniversary celebration. They were smiling, a perfect family in a perfect moment. Alex traced the edges of the frame, remembering how simple everything had seemed then. His phone buzzed with a text from Angela, "Don't forget dinner tonight. 7 p.m. We need to talk." The same words she'd used before telling him about her first pregnancy. Before asking for a divorce during their rough patch 15 years ago, though they'd worked through it. Before telling him about her mother's cancer. Alex put the photograph away and opened his computer again. He had 4 hours before dinner. 4 hours to figure out what was happening to his family and his company. As he began digging through old financial records, he couldn't shake the feeling that tonight's dinner would change everything. He just wasn't sure if he was ready for what those changes might be. Charlie's bar hadn't changed in 30 years. The same neon beer signs flickered weakly in the windows, the same scratched wooden booths lined the walls. Alex found Thomas in their usual corner, a glass of untouched scotch before him. "I've been going through the Summit development contracts," Thomas said without preamble, his voice barely audible over the ambient noise. "The shell company leads back to the Cayman Islands. But I found something else, authorization signatures I never approved, board minutes for meetings that never happened." Alex's throat tightened. "James?" Thomas nodded slowly. "He's been building this for months, maybe longer. The fake contracts, inflated projections, it's all connected to offshore accounts." "But Alex." He leaned forward, his face grave. "James isn't working alone." The implications hit Alex like a physical blow. "Who?" "Robert Miller for one. He's been laundering money through the equipment purchases." "But there's more." Thomas pulled out his phone, hands trembling slightly. "These photographs were taken last week at the Marina Bay Hotel." Alex stared at the images, his world tilting on its axis. Angela, his wife, sitting intimately close to Robert Miller in the hotel restaurant. Her hand on his arm, her wedding ring clearly visible in the harsh light. "I'm sorry," Thomas whispered. "There's more you need to see." But Alex was already standing, his chair scraping against the floor. The drive home passed in a blur of streetlights and memories. 32 years of marriage. Family vacations. The way Angela had nursed him through his heart surgery 3 years ago. The proud smile on her face when James graduated from business school. He arrived home early, the house dark except for the kitchen. Angela was there, chopping vegetables with precise, nervous movements. She startled when she saw him. "Alex. You're early." "I was just starting dinner." "Save it." His voice was eerily calm. "I know about Robert Miller." The knife clattered to the counter. Angela's face drained of color, but there was something else in her expression, not guilt, but fear. "Alex, please. You don't understand." "Then explain it to me." The rage finally broke through. "Explain how my wife and my head of operations are plotting behind my back. Explain how my own son is stealing from the company I built. It's not what you think." Angela's voice cracked. "Robert approached me 6 months ago. He had evidence, documents showing irregular payments, offshore accounts. He said if I didn't help him, he'd go public. It would destroy you, destroy everything you built." Alex's anger faltered. "What documents?" "Files from 20 years ago. Construction contracts with the state." "Bribes, Alex. Robert said he could prove you paid off inspectors during the highway project." "The highway project." Alex's chest tightened as old memories surfaced. The project that had saved the company during the recession. The project that had secured their future. "That's impossible. Those records were destroyed." "By Thomas?" Angela's laugh was bitter. Your faithful friend who's been embezzling from the company for the past 5 years. Alex's world spun. What are you talking about? Why do you think James started investigating the books? He found discrepancies, massive ones. All leading back to Thomas's private accounts. When he confronted Thomas, that's when the threat started. A key turned in the front door. James's voice called out, "Mom? Dad? Are you home?" Angela's eyes widened in panic. "He can't know I told you. Alex, please. If Robert finds out." "Finds out what?" James appeared in the kitchen doorway, his casual pose belied by the tension in his shoulders. "Dad, you're home early. I thought we were meeting at 7. Alex looked between his wife and son, seeing them as strangers. Everything he believed about his family, his company, his life, all of it built on shifting sand. "Sit down," he commanded. "Both of you. It's time we had an honest conversation about what's happening to this family." James moved to the kitchen island, his movements carefully controlled. "Dad, whatever Thomas told you." "Thomas told me enough." Alex's voice was steel. "But now I want the truth. All of it. Starting with those offshore accounts." A phone buzzed, Angela's. She glanced at the screen and went pale. "Robert's coming. He's almost here." James cursed under his breath. He wasn't supposed to. This isn't how it was supposed to happen. How what was supposed to happen? Alex demanded, but he was interrupted by another voice, Thomas's voice, from the doorway. "I can answer that," Thomas said, stepping into the kitchen. His right hand was in his pocket, and the bulge there left little doubt about what he was carrying. "But first, everyone needs to stay very, very still." The kitchen light cast harsh shadows across Thomas's face as he stepped further into the room. Alex had seen that expression before, 30 years ago, when they were young and desperate, facing down corrupt competitors who threatened to destroy everything they'd built. "You still don't understand what's happening here, do you, Alex?" Thomas's voice was gentle, almost pitying. "You never could see the whole picture. Always too focused on your precious legacy." Angela moved closer to James, her maternal instinct visible in the way she positioned herself slightly in front of their son. The gesture wasn't lost on Alex, it was the same protective stance she'd taken years ago, during the darkest period of their marriage. "The highway project," Alex said slowly, pieces falling into place. "It wasn't just bribes, was it? 3 workers died on that site." Thomas's hand tightened in his pocket. "Remember Carl Martinez? 26 years old, 2 young kids. The official report said operator error. But we all knew those support beams weren't up to code. You chose to look the other way, Alex. You always did." James inhaled sharply. "That's what the offshore accounts were about. Payoffs to the families." "Your father was very generous with the Martinez family," Thomas said. "Monthly payments, college funds for the kids. All very quiet, very discreet. But Carl's widow never cashed those checks. She kept them all, along with copies of the original safety reports." Alex's legs felt weak. He gripped the kitchen counter, marble cold under his fingers. "Maria Martinez. She's connected to Summit Development. Her son runs it," Angela said quietly. "William Martinez. He uses his stepfather's name now, William Harrison." The young face from the company profile. Alex closed his eyes, remembering a small boy at his father's funeral, clutching his mother's hand. "James found the payment records," Angela continued, her voice stronger now. "When he confronted me about them, I thought I could protect you. Robert Miller promised he could make it all go away. By stealing from the company?" Alex's voice cracked. "By destroying everything we built. By making it right." James stepped forward, his face flushed. "Do you know what it's like, growing up hearing about the great Alex Rock, the self-made man with perfect ethics. Then finding out it was all built on blood money. The words hit Alex like physical blows. He looked at his son, really looked at him, and saw not the polished executive from the boardroom, but a boy desperately trying to correct his father's sins. Robert Miller approached me first, James continued. He had everything, the safety reports, the original contracts, proof of the bribes. He said we had two choices: let the Martinez family take everything through the courts, or help them reclaim what was rightfully theirs through Summit Development. And you agreed? Alex's voice was barely a whisper. I did what you taught me, Dad. I protected the family legacy. Just not the way you expected. A car door slammed outside. Angela flinched. Robert's here. No, Thomas said, finally withdrawing his hand from his pocket. Instead of a gun, he held a small recording device. That would be the FBI. The sound of breaking glass shattered the moment. Through the kitchen window, Alex caught glimpses of tactical gear, flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. I've been working with them for months, Thomas continued. Building the case, gathering evidence. I'm sorry, Alex. But some debts have to be paid. James moved to stand between the agents and his mother. She wasn't involved. Everything she did under duress. I have proof. James, stop. Angela's voice was firm. No more secrets. No more lies. She turned to Alex, tears in her eyes. I kept so many secrets for you over the years. The late nights, the mysterious payments, the sudden windfalls. I told myself it was for the family, for James's future. But we built that future on other families' tragedies. The FBI agents were in the house now. Alex could hear them clearing rooms, their boots heavy on the hardwood floors. In these last moments before everything changed, he looked at his family, his wife's quiet strength, his son's desperate nobility, his oldest friend's weary determination. Dad, James said softly, there's something else you need to know. The kitchen door burst open, filling the room with shouts and blinding light. As Alex raised his hands, he caught a glimpse of another figure in the doorway, a young man with Maria Martinez's eyes, come to witness the end of an empire built on his father's grave. The interrogation room at the FBI field office felt both too small and impossibly vast. Alex sat alone, his hands wrapped around a paper cup of cold coffee, watching his reflection fragment in the two-way mirror. 3 hours had passed since they'd been brought in. 3 hours of silence broken only by the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sound of voices he couldn't quite make out. The door opened, and Special Agent Karen Martinez entered. The surname hit Alex like a physical blow. The family connections, it seemed, ran deeper than he'd imagined. Carl was my cousin, she said quietly, taking the seat across from him. I was 12 when he died. I remember his widow, Maria, sitting in our grandmother's kitchen, holding those uncashed checks and weeping. Not for the money, Mr. Rock. For the truth you buried with him. Alex's voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. I see his face every night. All 3 of them. I tell myself I didn't know, that the supervisors assured me everything was up to code. But I knew. Deep down, I knew. Your son knew too. That's why he came to us 6 months ago. The words took a moment to register. What? Karen opened a file, spreading photographs across the table. James, meeting with FBI agents in coffee shops, parking garages, hotel lobbies. He discovered the truth about the accident while going through old company records. But instead of burying it like you did, he chose a different path. The Summit Development contracts. A carefully orchestrated operation to expose the money laundering network within Rock Construction. Your son worked with us to track every illegal payment, every falsified document. He was determined to clean up the company, even if it meant destroying his own inheritance. Alex remembered James as a boy, proudly wearing his first hard hat on a construction site tour. Where is he now? Being debriefed. He's not under arrest, he's been working with us from the beginning. Your wife, too, for the past 3 months. Angela. The betrayal he'd felt earlier transformed into something else, a dawning understanding of the burden his family had carried. She figured it out after James started acting strangely. Confronted him. When he told her the truth, she insisted on helping. Said it was time to stop living with ghosts. The door opened again. Thomas entered, no longer the threatening figure from the kitchen but somehow smaller, older. The Martinez family is here. They want to talk. Alex's heart raced. I can't. You can, Karen's voice was firm. And you will. Because there's something else you need to know about the highway project. Something James discovered that even we didn't know until today. Thomas sank into a chair, his face ashen. The falsified safety reports. They didn't originate with the site supervisors. They came from higher up. From your father. The world tilted on its axis. That's impossible. Dad was retired by then. He was consulting. Unofficially. Thomas pulled out an old, yellowed envelope. I found these in the company archives. Letters between your father and the board, pushing for faster completion, higher profits. He knew the support beams were substandard. Knew the risks. But the company was in trouble, and he sacrificed 3 lives to save his legacy. Alex felt the weight of generations of secrets crushing his chest. And I helped cover it up. Protected his name instead of honoring those lives. Your father died thinking his secret was safe, Karen said softly. James found the letters 3 days after Angela's cancer diagnosis. Alex's head snapped up. What? Stage 2 breast cancer. She didn't want to tell you, said you were already carrying too much weight. That's when James decided enough was enough. No more family secrets. No more protected lies. The door opened a 3rd time. William Martinez stood in the doorway, his mother Maria beside him. They both carried the dignity of those who had waited long years for justice. But there was something else in Maria's face, not triumph, but a deep, exhausted sadness. Your son came to me first, Maria said, her voice carrying the ghost of an accent. Showed me the letters. Told me everything. He said his mother was sick, that life was too short for the poison of secrets. He asked for a chance to make things right. William stepped forward, placing a folder on the table. We have a proposal, Mr. Rock. One that could help both our families find peace. Before he could open the folder, another figure appeared in the doorway. James, his face bearing the shadows of sleepless nights and impossible choices. Behind him, Angela stood with quiet strength, her hand resting protectively on their son's shoulder. Dad, James said softly, it's time to tell you about Project Phoenix. The conference room they moved to felt less like a battlefield and more like a sanctuary. Late evening light filtered through the blinds, casting gentle shadows across faces worn by years of carried burdens. Alex sat between his wife and son, feeling the weight of their presence, not as accusers now, but as fellow survivors of a legacy of silence. James opened his laptop, his hands steady despite the exhaustion evident in his eyes. Project Phoenix started as an idea after I found Grandpa's letters. The company wasn't just built on cover-ups and bribes, it was built on real skill, real innovation. We have some of the best engineers in the industry, Dad. What if we used that for something more than profit? The screen filled with architectural renderings, a community center, medical facilities, affordable housing units. The Martinez family owns land near the original highway site. Land that's been sitting empty for 20 years because no one would develop it after the accidents. Maria Martinez leaned forward, her voice soft but firm. When James came to me with these plans, I thought it was another attempt to buy silence. But then he showed me the letters, told me about his mother's diagnosis. We talked about legacy, not just what we inherit, but what we choose to build. The proposal is simple, William continued, his father's eyes bright with determination. Rock construction partners with Summit Development to build a community complex. Job training facilities, medical research centers focusing on occupational safety and cancer treatment, affordable housing for families affected by workplace accidents. All managed by a joint board of both families. Angela reached for Alex's hand under the table. Her fingers were warm, steady. The cancer diagnosis, it changed everything. Made me realize we don't have time for old hatred. James showed me how we could transform all this pain into something healing. We've already secured preliminary funding, James added. Major healthcare groups, safety advocacy organizations. They're waiting for our signal. But it has to start with you, Dad. You have to be the one to tell the truth, all of it. About Grandpa, about the cover-up, about everything. Alex looked at Thomas, who nodded slowly. The FBI is willing to consider a deferred prosecution agreement. Full cooperation, substantial restitution, corporate restructuring. It won't be easy, but it's a path forward. A path forward. Alex tasted the words, remembering all the times he'd chosen the path of least resistance, of comfortable silence. He turned to Maria Martinez, seeing in her face not just the widow of the man he'd failed, but a potential partner in redemption. I've been carrying your husband's death for 20 years, he said softly. Telling myself it was too late to change anything, too late to make it right. I don't deserve forgiveness. This isn't about forgiveness, Maria interrupted gently. It's about choice. Every day since Carl died, I've had to choose between bitterness and hope. Some days, bitterness won. But hope lets us build something new from the ashes of what we've lost. Agent Karen Martinez cleared her throat. There's something else. During our investigation, we found other families, other accidents that were covered up, other workers who died because profits came before safety. This project could help them too. Angela's grip tightened on Alex's hand. I start treatment next week. The doctors are optimistic, but I want to see this happen. I want to know that all our years of silence finally led to something good. James pulled out one final document, a resignation letter. Summit Development was never about revenge, Dad. It was about creating an opportunity for change. I'm stepping down as CFO. If we do this, I want to earn my place in the new company, not inherit it. The sun had set outside, but the room felt warmer somehow, filled with the quiet energy of possibility. Alex looked at each face in turn, his son's determined hope, his wife's gentle strength, Maria's dignified resilience, William's cautious optimism, Thomas's weary wisdom. Tell me what you need me to do, he said finally. Tell me how we start. Maria reached into her bag and withdrew a small, worn notebook. First, you tell our stories. All of them. Starting with Carl's. No more hiding, no more protecting reputations. Just truth. Alex took the notebook with trembling hands. On the first page, in faded ink, was a photograph of Carl Martinez, smiling broadly in his hard hat. Below it, in Maria's careful handwriting, were the words that would change everything. This is not a story of tragedy. This is a story of transformation. 1 year later, Alex stood at the edge of the construction site, watching the sunrise paint the steel beams in shades of gold. The Phoenix Center was taking shape, not just as buildings rising from the earth, but as a testament to the possibility of transformation. Angela stood beside him, her head wrapped in a colorful scarf that had become her signature during treatment. The past year had stripped away her physical strength but revealed something far more powerful beneath, an unwavering resilience that had carried their family through the darkest days. The oncologist called yesterday, she said softly, her hand finding his. The latest scans are clear. Alex's breath caught. They'd learned not to take such moments for granted, to hold each piece of good news as precious and fragile. Why didn't you tell me? I wanted to wait until today. It felt right, somehow. She gestured toward the rising buildings. Life finding a way forward. The sound of approaching footsteps made them turn. Maria Martinez walked toward them, carrying two hard hats. She'd become a constant presence at the site, her quiet strength guiding the project's mission. Behind her came William and James, deep in discussion over blueprints. The first families move in next month, Maria said, handing them the hard hats. 20 units for workers' families affected by industrial accidents. The medical center opens in the fall. The hard hats bore a new logo, a phoenix rising from flames, encircled by the words Rock Martinez Foundation, Building Hope, Honoring Truth. It had been William's design, incorporating elements from both families' histories. The support group meets today, Angela added. We're expecting some of the new families. I thought maybe you'd like to come this time, Alex. He'd avoided the support meetings until now, feeling unworthy of sitting among those whose lives had been shattered by corporate negligence. But something had shifted during the past year, as the truth-telling had given way to truth-living. Dad. James approached, the blueprints tucked under his arm. The safety training center is ready for inspection. We've incorporated everything we learned from the old accident reports. Every mistake, every shortcut, every lesson paid for in blood, it's all there, teaching the next generation how to do better. The past year had aged James, but there was a peace in his eyes that hadn't been there before. He'd started at the bottom of the new company, working alongside the construction crews, learning every aspect of the business from the ground up. The workers respected him not for his name, but for his dedication to their safety and well-being. Thomas arrived next, looking more relaxed in casual clothes than he ever had in his lawyer's suits. After the investigation, he'd retired from law to focus on the foundation's advocacy work. The first scholarship recipients are here. Kids of workplace accident victims, going into occupational safety in medical research. They walked together toward the community center, where families were gathering for the support group meeting. Alex recognized many faces, widows, children, siblings of those lost to industrial accidents. But there were new faces too, bearing hope instead of just grief. In the meeting room, Maria opened the session with a ritual that had become sacred, lighting candles for those lost, reading their names, honoring their memory. When she came to Carl's name, her voice remained steady, strengthened by purpose rather than weakened by loss. Alex listened as families shared their stories, not just of tragedy now, but of healing, of finding unexpected friendship in shared pain, of building something meaningful from the ashes of loss. When his turn came, he stood slowly, feeling the weight of every eye in the room. My name is Alex Rock, he began, his voice trembling slightly. For most of my life, I thought legacy meant protecting the family name, hiding our mistakes, maintaining the illusion of perfection. I watched families like yours suffer in silence, telling myself there was nothing I could do to change the past. He looked at his own family, Angela's quiet strength, James's hard-won wisdom, and then at the Martinez family, who had transformed their right to vengeance into an opportunity for healing. But legacy isn't what we hide, he continued. It's what we choose to build from our mistakes. It's the courage to face our truth, to bear witness to each other's pain, to believe that transformation is possible even in our darkest moments. As he spoke, sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the faces around him, faces marked by loss but not defined by it, faces bearing the quiet dignity of survivors who had chosen hope over bitterness, creation over destruction. Outside, the Phoenix Center continued to rise, each beam and brick a testament to the truth that healing is not about erasing the past, but about building something new from its lessons. In the distance, a new crew of workers arrived for their safety training, their hard hats bearing the Phoenix logo, a symbol not just of rebirth, but of the profound courage it takes to transform tragedy into hope, one truth, one day, one life at a time. The legacy they were building now was not made of silence and shadows, but of light and truth, a reminder that even the deepest wounds can become wellsprings of healing when we have the courage to face them together.